Welcome to today's edition of Mental Health Matters. Today we're going to be talking about sexual assault and domestic violence. We have a great show ahead for you guys, so stay tuned. Hi Beth, I want to thank you for coming out on this Saturday morning and just being a guest on our show. Why don't we start by you just introducing yourself and just kind of talk about your position at Weave and how you got into this role.
Great. I am the CEO of Weave. Weave was founded in the late 70s, and I've been in one role or another since 1995. Wow. And I started out doing community relations, fundraising, and some direct services, and I've been CEO for 13 years.
Oh, nice, nice. That's a big role. How do you like it?
You know, it's great. I feel like every day I go to work and I make a difference in somebody's life in one way or another.
Awesome, awesome. So what is Weave?
You know, we're a domestic violence and sexual assault agency, and our mission is to promote safe and healthy relationships and also provide supportive services for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and sex trafficking, which is newer work that we're doing.
Wow, wow. And how do your, I don't know if you guys call them clients or whatever, but how do they normally hear about your agency, or do you guys get referrals for them, or how do they know about who you are?
They come to us in a number of ways. Sometimes law enforcement refers them. If somebody's sexually assaulted, they're usually interacting with law enforcement, and so we get that referral. Other times, it's friends and family members and people being aware of what's going on in their friend or family member's life and saying there's help for you out there and referring them that way.
Wow, wow. So I want to make clear that you guys serve women, men, and teens. Because I only said that because most of the time when people hear about domestic violence or sex trafficking and sexual assault, most of the time people associate that with just being females or females being a client of services like this.
And we certainly started out in the women's movement. You know, most agencies like We've started out because women were being assaulted and abused. And a lot of times it's for men, they don't seek help.
Right, exactly.
And for people who are in same-sex relationships, sometimes they already feel like there's a stigma about their relationship.
Exactly.
So to admit that something's going wrong in it can be really hard for them to come forward. And we know after years of doing this that a lot of these relationships start when people are youth.
Yes.
They're teens, and it starts out with an unhealthy dating relationship. And so, you know, we really are serving people of all ages, and we're trying to stop that cycle before people become adults, and it can get more dangerous for them.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting that you said that, because this kind of brings me to a mind of a friend of mine. He had met his, I would say, ex-wife at the time. I think they was like 16 or 17 years old. They started dating. And maybe about like the age of 19 or 20, they got married. They had a son. And I had known this guy for literally maybe about 5 years before I found out what was going on with him. I went over his house one day to get a haircut because he was my barber. And when I went over there, and keep in mind I've been knowing him for 5 years, this day I showed up on a Friday, I went over his house, and his wife was verbally abusing him. I had no clue that this was going on, literally no clue. And so afterwards, she put me out the house because she was very irate. And so she told him to get his things, and but he just ended up leaving with me. And I parked around the corner, and he just started crying and just started telling me all these stories. And I'm like, I never knew this was going on with you. And he was telling me that he was embarrassed. He said, you know, they call me Jay. He said, Jay, I'm embarrassed. I'm a guy. Like, what I look like telling another guy that, oh, my wife is, you know, abusing me or physically abusing me, and I was very shocked by that because he hid it so well. He hid it like so well. So that was one of the first times I've known a male personally that was getting, you know, verbally and physically abused by, you know, his wife or a female.
Well, and we very often see men where their female partner has mental health issues.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're afraid if they leave, they're leaving their kids with somebody who might be unstable. They don't want to be physically abusive back to the person, so they just kind of, you know, grin and bear it. And unfortunately, it doesn't feel safe for them to tell anybody. So I think that's great that we're helping get the word out here today. You know, that it's okay to seek help. It's okay to get help.
Yes, it's definitely okay. I want to talk about Pride because you know June this month is Pride Month. Do you guys offer services to the LGBT community?
We work really closely with the LGBT Center and with the LGBT community in general because,
Nice.
again, we know that it can be really embarrassing and it can be very scary to seek help when you're already somebody who maybe doesn't feel like your relationship is appreciated and acknowledged by the general public. And so we do some special outreach to the gay and the
That's good.
and the, you know, anybody, whether they are identifying male or female or not.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that people know that there's a safe place for them to go.
That's good. I know one of the things I've talked to Katie about. I want to have. I'm going to have that population on our show hopefully soon because I really want them to kind of talk about some of the struggles and some of the stigma that's attached to that community, so that they can kind of educate the community about some of the things that they go through. To have a service like what you guys do, to me, it creates a safe space for them to be able to, you know, get their needs met, so to speak, because a lot of times when people don't agree or they're uneducated about certain things or certain topics or certain communities, people tend to be violent or verbally abusive or, you know, things like that. So I commend you guys for helping that community out.
Well, and one area that we are really worried about is with sex trafficking, especially of young boys or people who are non-binary, because we don't see them as much as we see the girls out there, and they're often trusting older men or older
Yeah.
folks and getting themselves into really uncomfortable situations and dangerous situations. And as a community, we just haven't done as good a job as we can of finding those really vulnerable boys out there.
Yeah, wow. I want to switch a little bit because I want to talk a little bit about the teen dating violence. When I was reading it up on this on your website, that really caught my attention. Kind of speak to that a little bit for the
You know, we
people.
learn what feels like a healthy relationship when we're young,
Right.
and especially if we haven't seen one modeled in our own home, we may not know what love really feels like. And so we find that, you know, as young as 13, 14, 15,
Yes.
kids are, you know, basing their relationships on what they're seeing and feeling then, which if you think back to being 13 and 14, you know, it was like if somebody's really jealous
Yes.
of you being with other people, ooh, that feels so
Yes,
fun
exactly.
and fancy. Well, it doesn't feel so fun and fancy when you are 25 and you're not allowed to go out to happy hour with your girlfriends. So we do a lot of work in the schools, talking about gender violence, talking about, you know, male and female roles, and
Yes.
how being really rigid in those roles can really be dangerous as you grow up. And helping youth, you know, think about the songs they listen to and the violence in those songs,
Exactly.
and how normalized that can be for them.
Yeah, yeah. I know some of the things that you guys had listed on there, and this may seem minute to people, but checking someone's cell phone, name calling, mood swings, financial control. Now, in today's society, it's with technology. And so if you have these youth or teens that are in a relationship, for either or to check each other's phone like that, like you said, they think is, oh, this person loved me, they're jealous, and they misinterpret that as being a good thing. But it can easily slip off into something that is, you know, very unhealthy for their relationship, so to speak.
And 10 years ago, we weren't talking about using technology as a form of abuse, but now, you know, there are tracking devices.
Yes.
You know, there's Find Your iPhone, but there's also other things that you can put on there. There's abuse where people film film each other in compromising positions or
Yes.
send naked photos and then use
Yes.
that as a weapon. I'm going to
Yes.
post it on social media or I'm going to send it out to our friends. There are a lot of things that they're using their devices and all that social media as a weapon to control somebody.
Yeah, I just had a conversation with somebody about a week or 2 weeks ago. I think it's called revenge porn, is what it's called, the legal terminology for it. And I was kind of explaining to this person because it was a friend of mine had another friend that was kind of going through that situation, and I was explaining to him that what it was. Because for some reason I kind of did a little bit of research on him to help him out, so he could talk to his friend. And his friend was in a really bad compromising situation, but I did let him know to tell his friend that if this person exposed those pictures or videos, whatever, that he could get law enforcement involved, and they could potentially, prosecute the person.
Technology assisted exploitation is
Yeah.
the new fancy term for that. But
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it happens a lot where, somebody will be drunk and they take photos of them.
Yeah.
They didn't even willingly send the photo or agree to be videotaped. And
Yeah.
as our devices get more crafty, it's a lot easier if somebody's trying to exploit somebody or trying to control them.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say back to parents who think that their youth or their teen is in an unhealthy relationship? I mean, pertaining to domestic violence and stuff like that. What would you say some of the signs would be for the parents to just kind of to be aware of?
I think one of the main things is if their teen is like really becoming more isolated, not going out with friends as much, seems to really be keeping it just with their partner.
Yeah.
Obviously any physical abuse, but people get really caught up in the whole physical abuse piece of it, and that's generally not what we're seeing.
Exactly.
But a change in behaviors, it can be hard when the abuser is very charming. Because
Yes.
a lot of times people who are exploiting somebody or abusing them are really friendly and charming when you see them out and about.
Uh-huh.
And what you don't see is that controlling behavior. But if they're not hanging out with their friends as much, if they're being really careful about how they dress, because
Yeah.
maybe their partner's telling them to, don't dress sexy and,
Oh, man,
and that
yeah.
kind of thing. And just talking to teens, which can be hard.
Yeah.
But keeping that open door and making it clear that it's okay to tell them unpleasant things about their relationship. They're not going to forbid them to see them or something like that. But yeah, keeping that back and forth relationship with your kid.
I think isolation is key, and I think that I like that you hit on that because I know, and I try to be careful because I like to be as transparent as possible. I don't like to give out names, obviously, for the people I'm talking about. But I do know an individual, a female, that she got involved with this guy at a very early age. And one of the first things that he started doing was slowly start isolating her from her family. And once he started doing that, he was able to manipulate her and control her and to make her think that her family was actually her enemy. This girl was very close to her family. She, I mean, literally lost all relationships with her mom, her dad, her siblings. And he just got her off. But it was interesting because it was okay for her to be around his family, which I thought was kind of weird. But for some reason, I felt like his family was okay in that type of behavior in a sense that I didn't feel like they was really talking to the girl and telling her like, hey, this is not okay. You need to kind of. But I thought it was interesting to see how he was just able to just smooth and charm his way in and just boom. And it was like total switch in her behavior, her demeanor, and just how she communicated with people. It was just.
And we see that all the time, and it's one of the one things we work on with people when they come to us is who is in your social circle? Where do you have supports outside of just your partner? Because, when people wonder why somebody doesn't leave a relationship, well, where would they go?
Exactly.
They've been cut off from their family and their friends, maybe told they can't go to the church that they used to go to. Very often, I don't want you to work. I want you to be here for me all the time. They don't have anybody to turn to, and that's why it's important the agencies like Weave are around so that we're a safe place to go and we can help you rebuild your social structure and that support system so that you have somewhere safe to go.
Yeah, I know. So what are you guys' hours of operation there?
We are 24/7, so we've got our main building in Midtown where we're regular business hours during the week, and we have counseling, or people can just drop in and meet with somebody and figure out what their next step is. But then we operate a number of safe shelters that people can live in, And if somebody's sexually assaulted,
That's awesome.
we get a phone call and we dispatch somebody to the hospital with them.
So you guys do have a space that you could put them at if they need assistance in that area?
Yeah, we've got an 80-bed shelter.
Oh,
We
that's
own an
awesome.
eightplex where we put people, and then we have multiple two-bedroom houses where people can stay up to 2 years.
Oh,
So,
wow.
it
Wow.
just depends. Some people just, need someone to talk to and help make a decision. Other people really need to be with us for a long time while they rebuild their lives.
Do you guys have is there like a waiting list, or do people are normally can get in, or is it just by case?
It's case by case because we're
Okay.
usually pretty full. I mean, we'll
Okay.
put people in a motel if we have to, just to keep them safe. But sometimes it's a process to leave. People say, "Oh, why doesn't somebody just leave?" Well, sometimes it takes 2 years to really get yourself together. It may be that you need to get a better job so you can have the
Yeah.
money. All of that. So sometimes it's us guiding somebody through the process of safely leaving, because people are most likely to be killed when they finally have said, I'm out of here, I'm leaving, and the person has really lost all control. And even somebody who's never been physically abusive might escalate, and
Yeah.
we end up with people killed. So.
Yeah. I find it very interesting too that a lot of people who has not been in those type of relationships, abusive relationships, sometimes they don't really understand why people stay in those relationships. Because sometimes when you're on the outside looking in, it's easy to say, "Oh, I wonder why, Joanne won't leave him. He's not right for her. He does her wrong." But sometimes that emotional connection is really, really hard to break when you've been with somebody for so long. If you got kids by them, that's an emotional connection, and to me, I think that's even harder than even having a physical place to stay and things like that, because you're emotionally attached to this person.
Well, and I think people picture that Lifetime movie, where this person's just
Yeah.
abusive and horrible all the time, and that's not how it is. I
Yes.
mean, it goes in a cycle, and there may be this horrible incident, and then there's 3 months of everybody's trying to get along,
Yes.
and the partner's super sorry, and everything's going to change, and I'll never do it again, and then it happens again. And what we see is it's that cycle of over and over and over again, where somebody finally goes, he isn't ever going to change, and I need to get out of here. That finally
Wow.
incites somebody to leave. And very oftentimes we see it's with the kids.
Yeah.
That once they realize their kids are hearing things,
Yeah.
people are like, "Oh, they don't know what's going on." Well, unless you live in Buckingham Palace, I think they can hear what's
Yeah.
going on, and kids can feel it.
Yeah.
We see kids who can describe it exactly the way we describe it, with this kind of cycle of, well, it's tense, think tension's building, and then something terrible happens, and then everything's great. Kids
Yeah.
will say, then we go to Disneyland and everything's fine, and then it starts building up again.
Yeah. What type of impact well, I'm gonna speak for my own personal situation. My mom was in a very abusive relationship with my dad. He was never around, but when he did come around, he just really just physically and emotionally abused her. And I could still remember this to this day. It was 5 of us at the time, and I remember us, all of my mom kids at the time. We grew up. I think we was probably about 13, 15, 14. We was old enough when he had got out of jail one day, and he just came over there and I mean, he will always just physically just manhandle her. But we was too young to be able to do anything, and we would cry, and he would shake us off his leg. And I remember when he did get out of jail, and we was of age, and this is not proud for me to say on TV, but I'm gonna say it because I want to be really honest. But he had got out of jail one day, and he came home, and for some reason, he just started just beating my mother down. And all 5 of us, we were old enough then to help my mom to put a stop to that. Mm-hmm. And that day, he never put his hand on my mother again. And I think all of us unconsciously wanted to be old enough to kind of put a stop to this man for physically abusing my mom. It wasn't something we even talked about. I think we just mentally prepared ourselves once we got at a certain age to be able to help defend my mom and stuff. But that was horrific. It was a traumatic experience for all of us. Mm-hmm. So I know that kids being involved and seeing things like that, it affects them throughout their lives.
And what we see very often is those kids either become the abusers because they've seen it and it's been normalized for them, or they start defending their moms, and sometimes they end up dead because they're involved. They're inserting themselves in something that can be a really dangerous position. So.
Yeah. What are some of the signs of sexual assault, and what should someone do if they are being sexually assaulted?
Well, I think, usually with sexual assault, it's an incident, it's a they're at a party and they're assaulted. It's usually by somebody they know.
Yeah,
And a lot of times people don't want to report because they don't want to get the person in trouble or they think nobody will believe them.
yeah,
And it's really important to report as soon as possible because there's DNA on
yeah,
people's bodies and it starts going away.
yeah,
And so a lot of times somebody will tell a friend or tell a family member, and it's really important to say, I believe you, I believe this happened, to
yeah,
not question, what were you wearing, were you
yeah,
drunk, all of that. All of those things that can be barriers to seeking help.
yeah.
Too often, we're seeing a lot with the Me Too movement, people are
Uh-huh.
waiting a really long time to report, or they're now feeling like I can tell somebody what happened to me 5 years ago.
Yeah,
And in that case, it's really important that people get some mental health care.
yeah.
Come in and get free counseling at Weave. We offer free counseling just to
That's
kind of,
awesome.
reflect on what happened and get past that trauma because it can be really traumatizing to somebody to have been sexually assaulted and can affect their whole lives going forward.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I don't know if you ever heard this program called Ayala Fix My Life. It's pretty much about. Have you ever heard of that
No.
program? It's about this lady. She's like this therapist or whatever, and she go into people's homes and just kind of help them to work out their problems and stuff. And I remember watching just a lot of a lot of different seasons, in season 1, 2, and 3, and a lot of those women who were sexually assaulted, they were scared to come forth because they felt like well nobody believed them. And some of the women that did come forth, their parents did not believe them. So they kind of resorted back into just, oh, it's whatever. And they took this hurt and pain. And it's unfortunately that a lot of them kind of ended up doing things to the boys or whatever. But it's important, I think, when parents hear their children or their loved one come to them about something like this, I think it's important for them to really pay attention and listen and hear these people out to what they're saying.
There is great power in just the words, I believe you.
Yeah.
I believe you. I believe this happened to you. And too often we victim blame in this society. I mean,
Yes.
we don't prosecute very many sexual assault offenders in this community and in this country because juries, they want to see evidence, they
Yeah.
want to see data,
Yeah.
and it's a he said she said very often. So there were no witnesses, there isn't very much evidence, so it's way too easy to say I don't believe you, and but why would you put yourself through taking the stand, going through an evidentiary exam? I mean, it's just not even logical.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and it mentally put a person in a bad place mentally too when you know that this traumatic experience has happened to you, and the very people that are supposed to protect you and love you and encourage you don't believe you.
Exactly.
That's a traumatic experience in itself to me.
Yeah.
So for the people who watch this show, and if you have someone to come to you, a loved one to tell you some stuff that's going on sexually from someone that you may or may not know, pay attention to what they're saying to you.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about sex trafficking because I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of R. Kelly?
Yes.
Okay. So you already know.
I'm aware of
What do you think about that? And the reason I'm saying this is because it seems appear allegedly that a lot of his victims were youth, they were young, and allegedly he was able to kind of charm his way in and use his power, his wealth, and his fame to be able to get these young girls and just totally ruin their lives, and for lack of better terms. Did you watch the program on Lifetime?
I did.
Yeah. What did you think about that for someone that's actually in this field?
I mean, I think it's not uncommon, he's bigger than life.
Yeah.
And initially it's like, oh, he's paying attention to me and, isn't this fancy?
Yeah.
And he took advantage of people who, they're not fully formed adults.
Yeah.
And so they're still trying to figure out their sexuality. And,
Right.
and he really wielded a lot of power and control over them. And, yeah, has a lot of victims out there and a lot to account for.
Yeah, yeah, I know they're working on a case now against him and stuff like that, and I really hope that the criminal justice system do their job, so to speak, because it's a lot of hurt women out there, and it's going to affect them probably for the rest of their lives. They, in my opinion, they definitely need some form of counseling to help them get
Absolutely.
through.
I mean,
So,
it changes the brain when people are sexually assaulted. People go into that fight, flight, or freeze mode, that's the reptilian part of your brain. And any kind of trauma going forward, or even, hint of trauma can cause people to just shut down or to fly, that flight piece of it, and it changes how they respond to stress.
yes.
So it takes a lot of retraining of the brain for people to not just be in that kind of reactionary mode all the time.
Okay, I want to say this carefully because it's because I hope. Okay, I'm gonna say it like this, and I don't think that people would know that I'm talking about them. So I know someone who was sexually assaulted as a female when she was younger. She's an adult now. She's married. She have kids and things like that. A family member was with her not too long ago, and her husband was sharing that somebody that lives in their complex is a registered sex offender. So my friend was telling me when his sister husband said that, her whole demeanor changed. It was like he said she started spitting so much like venom out of her mouth towards the guy. It surprised him because he was like, this happened to her when she was like 3 or 4 years old, and it just recently came out maybe like a year ago. And I had to explain to him. I said she's harboring all of those emotions and those feelings and that experience in her, and she's not had a chance to talk to a therapist or a counselor and really work through what had happened to her.
And it's that, in her case, that fight mode,
Yeah.
She just kind of, that's how she reacted to
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So and I'm just kind of agreeing with what you're saying. So
Yeah.
it's interesting how something like that can just have a lifelong effect even after being married and having kids and starting your life and your career.
And it's never going to go totally away because that's part of her story and who she is. But you can move it from being right here in her face to over here. So it's
Yeah.
something you can kind of reflect on and know that that happened, but that it doesn't affect you on a daily basis. And I think that's a lot of the time when we see people coming in for counseling,
Yeah.
it's that it's just gotten to the point that they can't see anything but that trauma that they experienced, and they need to move it aside.
Wow. How important is it for parents to encourage their, especially I'm gonna say the females, the young ladies, their kids growing up? How important is it for them to encourage them, tell them that they're smart, tell them they're confident, tell the young lady that she's beautiful? Because it seems like a lot of these people who get caught up into sex trafficking and domestic violence seem like they have like low self-esteem.
Absolutely. And the people who are predatorially looking for a victim
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah.
And so, they're looking for somebody who has low self-esteem, somebody who can be groomed to
Yes.
either be a trafficking victim or their partner in a domestic violence case, where, I'm going to give you what I know you need.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be the person that you depend on because you're not getting it from anybody else. And I think that's one of the hardest things
Wow.
for us to fix.
Yeah.
Because if somebody's been beaten down and told they're nothing for years and years and years, they get little glimpses of it from the person that's exploiting them. It's really hard to help them find that, inner strength to
Yeah.
move forward and to feel good about themselves. So absolutely. I mean, anyone can become a victim of something, really.
Yeah.
But it just makes people much more vulnerable. And, we do a lot of work in the youth detention facility and with other
Nice.
youth serving organizations, looking at those kids who are really at risk for being exploited in some way.
Okay, good, good. So we're running out of time right quick. How can people get involved with Weave if they want to get involved?
We have volunteers. A lot of our work requires volunteers, so we have volunteer orientations. Go to our website at weaveinc.org and see how you can help. We have 3 stores. We need you to donate
Nice.
your things that don't spark joy in you anymore and donate them to us, or shop. And just listen and pay attention to the people around you and refer them for help if they need it.
Okay, so if someone wants to make a financial donation, can they do that as well with
They
you
can
guys?
do that online.
Okay.
Yes, we even take old-fashioned checks.
Okay,
Yeah,
nice.
no, we always appreciate that because most of our work requires contributions from the community.
Okay. So the clothing, like, do you guys accept? Do you guys need like a lot of men clothing or?
We need men's clothing because you guys never get rid of your clothes.
I
You just
know.
keep it until it has
I
holes
know.
in it. So
Okay.
yes,
Okay.
we need men's clothing and children's clothing and all types of clothes because we allow our clients to go shop for free in our stores and get
Nice.
whatever they need.
Okay, and before we go, I want to talk a little bit about the two events you guys have every year. Speak to that so the community kind of know about these events you guys have every
We
year.
have Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, where we have men wear high heels and show their support of sexual assault victims. And then
Nice.
we have an event called Feast for Weave, where
Okay.
it's an auction and a dinner that raises money for all of our programs.
Okay, if someone wants to get involved and volunteer and help with that, they just contact you guys. And
Yep.
okay.
And we need volunteers. We have lots of little events throughout the year. We have a beer fest coming up in September, so we use volunteers for that, and that raises more than $20,000.
Nice.
Again for our services. So there are lots of different ways people can get involved.
Okay, okay. Well, we run out of time, and thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. And that's it for today's edition of Mental Health Matters. If you like this particular show, or if you would like a DVD copy of this particular show, or if you would like to be a guest on the show, please dial 916-366-4600. Thank you.